Blog Talk Radio.
Good morning, everybody, and happy Saturday. It is that time, and the time is House Talk Pregame with me, your host, Dr. Lauren Pitts, empowerment coach and inspirational speaker. I am excited every Saturday to have these two amazing co-hosts with me, former scholar athletes Jared Johnston from Bowie State University and Ronnie Ransom from Virginia State University. And we are very, very hopeful that at some point in time before the season is up, or even as we go into basketball season, because we're all year long now, we're covering all the sports, that my man-child, Andre Garlick, who went to Drexel University, will be able to join us as a co-host as well on the show. We're excited, folks. There's so much going on in the world right now. Stuff is just crazy, and the news is coming out faster than we can keep up, and we know that all of this information that is coming forth is impacting us as a community. It's impacting our HBU family, student and professional athletes and their families. And speaking of family, our House Talk Pregame family has grown, and we are now a part of the Heritage Sports Radio Network family, and you'll be able to check us out very, very soon on Heritage Sports Radio Network, and we'll tell you more about that later on in the show when we go for a break. Jared, welcome back. Welcome back, J Money. I missed you.
Thank you. I know I missed y'all. I didn't feel right not getting my diagnosis for the week as well, you know, because I enjoy that every week.
You didn't get your couch
coach. Right. Y'all definitely held it down as expected when I listened to the show over. So I definitely, happy for you guys. Definitely happy to be back. Like Dr. Pitt said, we have a brand new family, more people coming on to the House Talk Pregame. And with that is a whole new level of House Talk Pregame where we are replacing, in a sense, the football season that unfortunately we're missing out on a lot of high school teams, college teams, things like that. So we're bringing you some football talk, but also bringing you some real life talk that can help our student athletes off of the field with their daily lives as they transcend beyond football, and even the family members or guardians that are involved with them. So we're going to always get, straight to it, give you a lot of knowledge on each show. We're here to help you guys as, this is something that is helpful for us, and we want to provide therapy to you guys, a good time to escape if that's what you need. We have a lot of answers that we're going to give you every single week, new information. We want to dial in. You guys can tap in with us, and it's time to optimize. You got it, Ronnie.
Thank you, Jared, and good morning, everybody. It's a beautiful Saturday morning. Wish we could be playing some college football, but, we're going to get there for our HBCUs. But most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, we definitely want to hear from everybody, our HBCU family, our former and current student athletes. So during the show, we will be taking call-in questions and comments by simply dialing direct at 515-605-9744 or email your HBCU shout-outs, questions, or comments to htpregame@gmail.com. Back to you, Dr. Pitts.
So one of the things that we're really excited about, and we decided that we wanted to do every show, is that we wanted to provide a diagnosis of the week. And the reason why we do that is because we understand that mental illness and mental wellness is something that has a tremendous impact on communities of color all across the nation, and truth be told, all over the world. So we wanted to make sure that we were providing education and resources that could help Black and brown communities all over the nation and all around the world to be mindful of some mental health disorders that are not only impacting us as a global community, but that we are seeing very, very prevalent among scholar athletes and professional athletes that their families and society at large have to deal with. So our diagnosis of the week today is going to be impulse control. And one of the things that's so important to understand about impulse control problems is that it really can manifest itself in erratic behavior and performance. An individual who suffers from an impulse control problem might exhibit episodes of aggression, fighting, and risky sexual behavior. So, it's not something that should be taken lightly because, particularly where kids are concerned, and not just adolescents, but because we're looking at scholar athletes, our focus is on, the adolescent scholar athlete, but kids in general will act up or become disruptive or defiant sometimes. Disruptive and conduct disorders involve much more severe and longer lasting behaviors than typical short lived episodes. Disruptive impulse control and conduct disorders refer to a group of disorders that include oppositional and defiant disorder, conduct disorder, intermittent explosive disorder, pyromania, and kleptomania. These disorders can cause people to behave angrily or aggressively toward people or property. They may have difficulty controlling their emotions and behavior and may break rules or laws. And again, the first thing that comes to mind, fellas, when I think about this is when we were watching the documentaries on Aaron Hernandez and the aggression that he showed, particularly, even before it got to the murder and all of that stuff, even in college, that was one aggressive brother on and off the field. And it really does make me question whether or not there was something more going on that had never been diagnosed. An estimated 6% of children are affected by oppositional defiant disorder or conduct disorder. Each year, an estimated 2.7% of children and adults in the U.S. are affected by intermittent explosive disorder, kleptomania, and pyromania, which are rare, affecting 1% or fewer of people in the U.S. The angry, aggressive, or disruptive behaviors of people with conduct and other disruptive disorders are more extreme than typical behavior. And those behaviors are frequent, are long-lasting, occur across different situations, and cause significant problems. And Ronnie's going to talk to you a little bit more about it. But what we want folks to know here is that a lot of times we'll hear people talking about, oh, I just got a bad temper. Oh, I'm a hothead. Oh, I got a short fuse. Oh, he'll zap out in a minute. Oh, he just blacks out. But this is something that we have to address as a people because it could potentially and is creating problems that are systemic in nature and having a domino effect in our communities. Ronnie?
Thank you, Dr. Pitts, and that was a lot of helpful information. And something else I wanted to touch on with impulse control real quick is, oftentimes, especially when you struggle with impulse control as a child and you develop into your adolescent years and your young adult years, typically what it all boils down to is, the lack of impulse control as you get older also shows a lack of discipline with yourself and a lack of discipline with controlling your emotions and behaviors. And something I like to talk with my clients about is, there's two types of maturity. When we think of maturity, we all kind of group it all together as, when somebody's mature, that means encompassing their entire life is mature. But you have maturity where, you might be mature career-wise and things like that, but you also have emotional maturity. And, let's be honest, all of us struggle with some form of impulse control, whether it's, with behaviors, money management, diet, things of that nature. We all have some type of impulse control that we could always get better at. So some of the coping skills I want to talk about this morning is one of the first ones, and it sounds cliche, but it's very simple. If it's out of sight, it's out of mind. And this kind of touches more on, with impulse control for, money, or like Dr. Pitts was saying, if you're a pyromaniac or kleptomania, kleptomania is somebody who's a pathological stealer. Pyromania is somebody who is infatuated with setting fires and learning how to control them and things like that. So if you're a pyromaniac, if candles are something that sets you off, keep candles out of sight. If you're somebody who has a hard time with stealing or taking things that aren't yours, keep money, possessions, jewelry, things like that out of sight, out of mind, or avoid those things. Another coping skill is what I like to call the 72-hour rule, where, let's say you're in the store and, you're on a tight budget, or you just ain't got it, and you see something you really want, and you just get that urge to just want to spend your money and buy it. What I like to tell people is walk away from it for 3 days. If after 3 days you still have that same urge and that same desire to get it, get it. But if that does not, typically after you've walked away from it and you had a chance to cool off and really process, that urge goes away. So 72-hour rule is a really good rule. Stop and think. And so stop and think technique is basically, let's say, you're with a partner in a relationship or something like that, and, y'all in a heated argument or having a disagreement, and you just want to, just snap at them or yell at them, inside your head, tell yourself to stop and think. So literally you stop whatever thoughts you're having right then and there, and try to think of positive outcomes or positive ways to get through that situation. Of course, meditation. Meditation is also another good skill to use, to block out those thoughts, those anxious thoughts, those urgent thoughts, and to be more in the present moment. And like I said, for those of you who struggle with money impulse issues, setting a budget and sticking with it. If you're somebody who struggles with eating or has an eating disorder, following a meal plan so you don't just mindlessly eat, or, nervous snacking or lazy snacking, things like that, have a meal plan. And like I said, if you're in a relationship or, married, in a committed relationship, whatever the case may be, finding out each other's way to communicate through problems and issues and things like that, as opposed to just reacting. And, typically for student athletes, and Jared, you can also touch on this real quick before I stop talking, in football especially, we're always taught to react and not think, because if you're on the football field and you're thinking, you're behind. So,
right.
And, for student athletes, that's always, that's sometimes kind of a hard mindset to shift out of once you're not playing anymore, from just, going from reacting to thinking before you react. And that takes practice, and that takes time. And that also helps develop in your emotional maturity as well. So those are some coping skills and tips to help with impulse control. And like we always say, me and Dr. Pitts, if you're still struggling with these things, please go seek some form of professional help, whether it's a therapist, a mentor, psychiatrist, whatever the case may be. Seek out some professional help.
Yeah.
No, so I agree with that. Especially talking about reacting, and you hit it head on, where in the sports realm, if you're thinking, then you're going to find yourself on the bench, basically. That's what it basically says. So You are taught to react. Yeah, you're taught to react. And the thing is, if you react and you make a mistake, that's better than overthinking and not taking action, even if that action is right, but you may be just a second slow. So I definitely agree with that wholeheartedly. Every week we go into shouting out our HBCUs, as we all have attended HBCUs, and we want to continue to show love and support, especially in these times where our HBCUs are getting a lot more attention with some of the unfortunate situations. So the first school I want to shout out is Fort Valley State, which is located in Fort Valley, Georgia. It's the second largest public university area-wise, with 1,365 acres of campus. They have a bachelor's degree in more than 50 majors, as well as master's degrees in several fields of study. They compete in the Division II athletics. Notable alumni, if you guys watch a lot of NFL, Marquette King, who's a former Oakland Raider, and I believe is the only black punter to play in the NFL or actually be at that star level in the NFL. So that's major. Okay. Also, Ricardo Lockett, he played with the Seahawks and 49ers. I believe he won a Super Bowl. He might have with the Seahawks. And they actually have 9 NFL alumni, which is pretty surprising.
Oh, nice.
Coming from yeah, I was surprised at that. And then another alumni, Calvin Smyer, class of 1970. He was elected to the Georgia House of Representatives in 1974 as its youngest member at the age of 26. And currently is the executive vice president of the $34 billion financial corporation Synovus Foundation. So that's definitely major. And my second shout out is Mississippi Valley State University, which opened its doors in 1950. Mississippi Valley State was created in the hopes that it would attract African-American applicants who might apply to the other premier universities in Mississippi, like the PWIs, Mississippi State, University of Mississippi, resulting in the black population in Mississippi feeling less pressure to integrate those premier universities in the state. Notable alumni, everyone I'm pretty sure knows if you watch football, Jerry Rice, the Hall of Fame receiver, best receiver in the game. And they actually have 14 former NFL players in their alumni. So, yeah, shout out to Mississippi Valley and Fort Valley. They got some big things going.
So there goes the myth that NFL players don't come out of decent schools. Goodness gracious.
Exactly. If you didn't hear it anywhere else, you heard it on House Talk.
That's right. Wow.
Man, I can only imagine what it was like to play at those schools back in the 70s and 80s before they really started going to the bigger schools. I can only imagine the competition at those schools.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. It was crazy, probably.
So there are two schools I will be shouting out this week. The first one is Tougaloo College, located in Tougaloo, Mississippi. Tougaloo College was founded in 1869, and one of the notable alumni is Constance Slaughter Harvey, who became the first black female judge in Mississippi. Shout out to Mrs. Harvey and Tougaloo College. And then the second college I will be shouting out is Lincoln University of Missouri, located in Jefferson City, Missouri. Lincoln University was founded in 1866, and one of their notable alumni is probably somebody a lot of people are familiar with, Joe Torre, who is an actor and comedian who starred in the movies House Party and Poetic Justice, among many other movies.
Didn't know that about Joe Torre. That's surprising.
No. All right. So my shout-outs this week are Winston-Salem State University, founded in 1892 in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. Notable alum, Stephen A. Smith, sports journalist, talk show host, and former basketball player. Earl Monroe, former NBA player for the New York Knicks. And the one and the only Brother Louis Farrakhan, politician and leader of the Nation of Islam. Yeah. I'm like, oh my goodness. Winston-Salem, yeah, me either. I'm just like, okay. Winston-Salem State has a rich curriculum rooted in a high-quality liberal education. And then my second shout-out goes to Jackson State University, founded in 1877 in Natchez, Mississippi. And everybody thinks that I picked it because Deion Anderson's football coach and all that stuff. But that's not why I picked them. I had already picked them before it was announced. So, notable alum, Walter Payton, NFL Hall of Fame class of 1993. Tanea Stewart, actress who played in The Heat of the Night and in the movie A Time to Kill. And then Rod Page, who was named as the former U.S. Secretary of Education. And Jackson State is known for its rich tradition of educating young men and women for leadership. And wow, what is that going to look like moving forward with athletes? You know, oh my goodness, it's just so exciting, so exciting. So look, folks, this is what we want you to keep in mind during this show, is that we are having some really, really hard discussions about real life, down and dirty topics and issues that are impacting not just scholar and professional athletes and their families and the HBCU community, but really affecting all of us as black and brown persons all across the nation and all around the world. So that being stated, we know that you have something to say. We know that our listening audience all across the nation and all around the world is sitting at home nodding their heads when we're having these discussions. And we want to hear from you. So we want you to call in live during the show to 515-605-9744 or email us at htpregame@gmail.com. You can also download the Heritage Sports Radio Network app, so you can listen anywhere by visiting the App Store or Google Play. Search Heritage Sports Radio Network, hit the download button. You can also help us keep these conversations growing by your sponsorship with a gift in whatever amount you can afford by visiting drlaurendpitts.com and clicking on the donate button, or you can email us at htpregame@gmail.com to receive a sponsorship packet. Jared is gonna kick off this morning, and we are about to get into a powerful, powerful show with some awesome discussion that's going to educate, empower, and liberate you, our listening audiences all over the world, and those connected to you. Jared?
Yeah, for sure. Like Dr. Pitt said, we got a great show. Definitely very, very excited for this one. The title is How Good Has Football Really Been, which may catch a few people off guard. You know, when you think about that title and what it means, it may mean different things for some people depending on how their certain playing career went. But we're definitely going to dive into some deep conversations. And this title of this show is from the book that I authored, From Cleats to Loafers, which does shed light on the transition phase for our athletes post-athletics as they detach from their respective sport, and gives ideologies that they can put towards their life starting today to help them, continue to be successful post-athletics. So we're going to get into the topics of reflecting on careers, on your playing career, regrets, solution-focused strategies, individual team accomplishments and life lessons, the benefits of the game, and what are some things that maybe, coming from a player standpoint, Ronnie and I may have, potential regrets that we didn't do during our playing days, maybe some things we could have done better. We'll hit, on the topic of the value that is in playing college sports, but also the other factors that would-be college and professional athletes should consider in their decision-making processes. What are the pros and cons of being a professional athlete? So we're going to get into a very, very in-depth conversation. And to start it off, I want to ask you guys this question. What do you think of when somebody says, how good has football really been? Like, what comes to your mind personally for you guys?
I'll take a crack at this answer real quick. When we were discussing our topics and things like that, and we came up with the title "How Good Has Football Really Been," I definitely did a lot of deep reflection on just that idea of how good has football really been. And I think that's for me, I think for me and you, Jed, I think that's a subjective answer and things like that. For most of us playing football, at the collegiate level and things like that. And I think we can both agree that, football was, a great thing for us. Even just talking about, a couple weeks ago how we identified through ourselves with football and things like that. Football has been a tremendous thing. If you didn't play football, or if you played football in high school and you didn't get a chance to play in college, I'm pretty sure your views on football might be a little bit different. You might just see it as like, oh, well, it was just something to do with the extra, curricular activity and things like that. So I think it really depends on the person and what they got out of it. And later on in the show, we'll definitely talk about the benefits and the pros and cons of playing football at the high school and collegiate level. But for me, football has been a tremendous thing in my life and one of the greatest things to happen in my life.
I think about it from, I guess, obviously a different perspective because I never played football. As I've said on previous shows, being in relationships with scholar athletes and being the mother of scholar athletes, I think about it within the context of the counted cost. When I hear, when Ronnie, when you share that you've had 30-some concussions in your entire career from the time you started at age 7 up until you stopped playing, I think about a number of different things. Within the professional realm, I would imagine that one of the benefits, and we'll get into this later, but when I think about the pay and liberation for the family and financial freedom and all of those things, but I think that we have to look deeply at the impact that the journey has on one's mind and body and the lasting effects long after your football career is over. What's left? And when you look back in retrospect with the health issues and the pain and the mental illness, there's so many lasting effects. I can't help but to wonder if it's all worth it. I don't know when I think about, for example, Tony Dorsett and the illness and Walter Payton and so many others that suffered tremendously with medical conditions. Again, Aaron Hernandez. Is it worth it when you count it? It's an all things considered decision. I don't know. I can't answer that. I didn't play. I'm on the outside looking in.
Right. Yeah, I think from your perspective, I think you're right. You are coming from more of a spectator point of view, and with Ronnie and I playing, I think in my playing days, somebody asked me this question, and they said what you had said, Dr. Pitts, and this wouldn't even be anything personal to the person, but just because I'm playing and I'm so involved in the sport, I would say, no, I disagree, because you really don't want to deal with that reality. But, when I was playing, it definitely was good. I traveled for football. I've been to states. I've been, to Hawaii for football. Now, would I have ever went to Hawaii if I could play football? No, I wouldn't. So, it exposed me to a lot of different things. It exposed me to a lot of different people from different states, from different cities, learning to adapt to different teammates, learning to adapt in the locker room from people from different environments, and then in the professional realm, learning how to adapt and work together and be successful. But I do agree with some of the, I guess you want to say, negatives that do come from it. And I think one thing you hit on that's important is when you said how it can really set up one's family for, generational wealth if they're in a position to play in the NFL and be paid millions of dollars. I think that is something that is maybe one of the best things, honestly, when you talk about, years down the line. But also we have to think about the kid that doesn't get the $1 million contract, and then when they finish, they may start to think, maybe I wasted my time and I could have done something else. What do you guys think about that?
I agree, and just to touch on what you're saying, I think we all have this mindset. When we start playing football at an early age, really the ultimate goal is to make it to the NFL. When I started playing, that was my one and only goal. When teachers used to ask, well, what do you want to be when you grow up? Well, I want to be an NFL player. Well, what if that doesn't work out? Well, I'm not trying to hear all that right now. Don't bring that negative talk over here. It's NFL at once. And speaking of regrets, one of the things that I definitely thought about after playing was definitely the injuries that I had mounted up on my body and things like that. And we can touch on that a little bit later in the show, but there were points in times after I finished playing, and I would ask myself, well, was this really worth it? Was it really worth putting my body through this? And of course, like you were saying, Jared, when you're playing and stuff like that, it's worth it, And I, even to this day, I would do it all over again. I might not necessarily want to go through the injuries again, but the workouts, the camaraderie in the locker room, and building brotherhoods, with your teammates and things like that. I would do all of that over again without hesitation. But we played football with the mindset of we want to be professionals, we want to go to the league, and a lot of only less than 1% actually get to realize that dream. So for the 99.9% of us who don't get to realize that dream, that's something that I've definitely battled with, and I'm pretty sure a lot of my other former teammates and other scholar athletes out there have also struggled with that, that reality of, was it really worth it?
Right. Yeah. And there's a article that I had found, and it was about Justin Blackman. I'm pretty sure you guys may remember him. He went to Oklahoma State, the receiver. Yeah, and, he was regarded as the best receiver, arguably in college football history, and he was expected to go on and have a long NFL career, be a top 10 draft pick and be good, as long as he keeps his head on straight. But there was an article when he was at Oklahoma State, he began to have issues on campus that resulted in him getting suspended, resulted in him being in the news for all the wrong reasons. But one of the articles I found was when he was getting close to the draft time, and there was word that he had issues with alcohol and things like that. And a scout from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers became aware of that. So what he did is he went out to a bar that he heard black men frequent throughout the week on Oklahoma State's campus. And he just sat in the bar every day from 3 p.m. to 11 p.m. for 5 days straight just to see, how many times he came into the bar. And when they asked him what was the number, he said it was too many to count. And that just shows me right there, this is a guy that went to the NFL. So on the surface, football has been very good for him. But I highly doubt that there was not anyone on that campus in a position of power with Oklahoma State that was not aware of this situation, and they could have stepped in and saved him because he's not in the NFL anymore. I know he got into some more legal trouble, and it's like, yes, football was good for him. It got him to the NFL, but ultimately football hurt him. And I'm not talking right, and not talking about the sport in general in between the white lines, but just the community of football that he was around. It hurt him. It honestly did more damage for him than it did good for his life. And I think that's something that is very, very sad, as it relates to how good has football really been.
And I want to take it to a systemic perspective, which Jared, you just sort of segued to, is that when we talk about how good has football been, I think that we have to be responsible in looking beyond the generational wealth, right? Lord knows I'm not suggesting for a moment that is not important. It is absolutely positively important. I think, though, we also have to look at the humanity of it. And what I mean by that is that what impact is the wealth and the travel and all of that having on the family system as a whole, right? And I mean, the reality of it is we there have been horror stories in the news, right? It seems to be more. You tend to hear more about the infidelities, at least from my understanding, in the NBA as far as what has made the public, eye. But everything is not peaches and cream and glitz and gold. There's life beyond, the financial component, because the reality of it is you can live a middle class quality of life or an upper class quality of life. You can live very, very comfortably and not be a multimillionaire. You know what I'm saying? So not making light of the wealth in any stretch. I mean, we all want financial freedom, but I wonder if we conducted a study on the wives or the spouses and the children and the extended family members and friends of the athletes, if they would all agree that football has been good to them. Because, what has it cost the family? What sacrifices has the family had to make to support this journey?
Right.
I think a good example of that would be Tom Brady and his wife. His wife is, very successful in her own right. She was a Victoria's Secret model for quite some time. Yep. And, once her and Tom Brady started having kids, I think she kind of put her career on hold and did more administration, stuff like that. But, within the last couple of years, as Tom Brady has, turned 40, 41, 42, and I think he's 43 this year as of August, she's been more vocal about, her gripes and her, the frustration that sets in, when, for somebody like Tom Brady, who's, revered as, the greatest quarterback of all time, and rightfully so. Right. But the amount of preparation and the amount of dedication and time he spends off the football field and outside of that, actual football facility at home, he's been, recorded as saying that when he gets home, all he does is, he say hi to his wife, say hi to his kids, and he goes to his room and watches film the rest of the day until he falls asleep. And even for, as far as basketball, Jared, I know you know who Iman Shumpert is. He was, on the Cleveland Cavaliers championship team, and he's currently married to, all-around, phenomenal talent, Tiana Taylor. He just did an interview a couple weeks ago I was watching, and he was talking about that championship run where, he said, oftentimes, Tiana would be like, damn, you going back to the court again to shoot? You just got home from practice. You going back out to the court again? And he was like, when he finally got that ring, he could show her, like, yes, this is why I was never at home. This is why I was always at the gym for this. And, for somebody like him, that's what you want. That's what we all do it for. We all do it for the championship and trophies. But to our significant others, they don't really see that gratification or that instant gratification. Now when you get to that level, I'm pretty sure, the money's coming in, the contract's coming in, the endorsements coming in, and things like that. But, what you get in monetary gain and superficial gain, you lack in attention, love, and things like that.
Yes. And for some of us, look, trust, Dr. Pitts is not knocking bling. On no day coming, I'm not knocking travel. And I have, my fiance informed me the other day that I have very expensive days. Okay, well, handle that. Go ahead and handle that, babe. But here's the thing, though. At the end of the day, even though I do like nice things, I'm not a materialistic person, and I want to be able to live comfortably. Being wealthy is on the horizon in the name of Jesus. being wealthy is on the horizon. But one step beyond that, though, at the end of the day, and we hear it all the time, we can be comfortable. The wealth provides for us financial freedom that allows for us to live comfortably long after the person providing that wealth is dead and gone. But at the end of the day, when we're putting somebody that we love and care about in the ground, how many diamonds I have in my ring and how many designer bags and Italian leather shoes I have, I mean, let's keep it real. Kobe left his family set for life, but do you think that they would give it all up to have him back another day?
Every penny of it.
Yeah, I think that's definitely very important. I think, like along the lines of the generational wealth talk about on that conversation, how you said systemic, how it needs to change systemically, but I think just the term generational wealth, people automatically think, especially as a young person, you automatically think, okay, I'm going to make it to the NFL, the NBA, entertainer. I'm going to get this huge amount of money so then my family will be good. But generational wealth doesn't mean that you are leaving your children with $1 million. It can be, you can be the one in your family to start, and maybe you just leave your child with $10,000. And then you show them by actions how to carry out their daily life, and they can take that over the financial part, and that can be something that will propel them to leave generational wealth for their grandkids, and it can overlap. But I think we're just in such a rush to get to a certain number because what we see on TV or what we see on social media, that, like you said, you forget that you can have a middle-class life and you can have a family at home. You come home to your family every day. You go on vacations with your family. You have that love and that nurture inside the home. And I can only imagine it has to be tough to be a professional athlete. I mean, even in college, and Ronnie probably can attest to it as well, just being somebody in a greater spotlight than your average student, it can be tough if you have a girlfriend, if you're, whatever you have, if you have a boyfriend and things like that. But, like, one of my college coaches, he played with the Saints, and he said that when they would get off the bus at a hotel for an away game, there would be lines of females waiting for them to go to their hotel room. And he told me that, like, you know what I'm saying? I'm like, okay, I figured it was, some stuff going on, but I didn't think it'd be that blatant in your face. Like, when the coaches they know you have a wife at home, and whatever organization, they have these females there, and you do your thing, you go back home, and that is going to impact the relationship. If you end up in a divorce, now your kids are affected negatively by this. Now they're growing up with, issues mentally, eternally, and that takes on a whole nother issue in itself. And I think for football to really be as great as we want it to be, we have to be very, very mature, very, very, steadfast in our values and our morals and things like that.
Exactly.
You know what I
just
just
to
thought
touch
about
on
while y'all were talking. Go ahead, Ronnie. Were you gonna say something?
I was just going to say to Jared's point about the generational wealth, and something that, especially in the African American community that we struggle with is, and it's kind of a hard reality is, we might not be the generation, those who have started that generational wealth track, we might not be able to reap those benefits. And I think oftentimes a lot of us struggle with that idea that, well, I'm doing these things to make it a better future for my family and their family, but I also reap those benefits too. And oftentimes that's not the case. And we also have to think, as far as African Americans go, we're so far behind with, the monetary gains and that generational wealth due to the systemic racism and the systemic oppression that we face for 403 years in this country. We might not be able to see the benefits or the reap the rewards. But, we have to keep in mind that we're doing this for our future generations. And sometimes that's a hard reality to face. I just wanted to make that point real clear for our listeners and things like that.
Well,
right.
How and we don't have to go here if you guys don't want to, but I think that it's worth mentioning. How many times have we heard in the news about athletes being broke? And that's across all the sports. It's not just football. It's football. It's basketball, it's boxing, it's baseball. It's like you come out the gate, you're in high school, you want to do extraordinarily well, you want to go into whatever the respective league is based upon your selected sport, and you've got all these big ideas. And I've always said, particularly where the NFL is concerned, I wonder if they have financial advisors in place that can help these athletes, particularly these young athletes of color that are coming from these impoverished situations, to learn how to manage all of this wealth and all of the glitz and the glamour and the pressure that comes with coming, in the grand scheme of things, if you will, from nothing into into like exorbitant levels of wealth. Because we hear about that pretty frequently too. It's like, you was making, what do you mean you're broke? How are you broke?
Absolutely.
It's crazy to me.
And from us looking from the outside in, when you sit there and see somebody who gets, 10, 20, $50 million contract, and then as soon as they're finished playing, they're broke within. So I think the average for most professional athletes is like 2 or 3 years after they finish playing, they end up going broke. And you're just like, how? And,
How's that possible?
And I don't know if you all listen to Undisputed that comes on Fox Sports, but Shannon Sharp on there, he makes a great point when it comes to money and stuff. And he says, money will only exaggerate the behaviors you had in that moment right then and there. So, we kind of touched on it.
Yeah.
We kind of touched on it in the first week, and I kind of shared a story of when I got my first refund check in college. I was 18 years old, and I got almost a $2,000 check. That was the most money I'd ever got at one point at any time in my life. I didn't know how to act. I blew it all in less than a week, So I can only imagine if I was a 22-year-old kid just drafted into the NFL in the first 2 rounds, and my signing bonus is $10-15 million. Goodness gracious, there's actually GQ does a show on YouTube with rookies, and it's called My First Million, and they do it for the NBA and NFL players, and then they basically ask them, what did you spend your first million on? And a lot of them, of course, it's house, cars, bought my parents a house, bought my parents a car. Typically, and I would like to think that the NFL has done a better job of providing financial advisors to the rookies and things like that, because I know they have a rookie symposium. But like we were saying, a lot of the time these athletes come from impoverished homes, and the name that keeps popping up in my head is Trent Richardson, who was a running back for Alabama. And they did a story. He was a running back for Green Bay too, and they did a story on him a couple years ago about how he essentially went broke. And he touched on friends from school, from high school and college, family members who were coming out the woodworks when they found. I think he was the 3rd overall pick, and he had weight issues. He couldn't keep his weight down, but he was also paying for this, and he had a money manager who basically spent all his money on just BS. And by the time he got cut, he was broke.
Yep. Mike Tyson, Allen Iverson, come to mind.
Yeah. Well, Iverson, he has I believe it's $55 million deal with Reebok that's waiting for him once he turns. I believe it's somewhere in his 50s. Once he turns a certain age, he has that money for him.
50.
Yeah, so again, but at the end of the day, you still have to manage it. You still have to, treat that money right, or else you can end up in a similar situation. And I think like another thing, when you talk about how good has football really been, I think that as student athletes in general, whichever sport, like you can't let how good or bad football has been determine how good your life will be. And I think we have to learn how to separate the two, because football can be terrible for you, as far as you achieving the goals that you want, but you still can go on and achieve so many other goals in life outside of the football field. So I think that when we can learn how to separate the two, football from, the life outside of the field, I think that we'll be able to transition, a little better when that time does come for us, whether it's high school, college, NFL, things like that. And what do you think are some regrets? I know for myself, some regrets I had when I was thinking, football wasn't, what I originally wanted it to be, in the grand scheme of things, because I didn't achieve my goal. One thing I would regret is put a little bit more, even though I knew I put everything into it. I'm thinking like, man, maybe I could have did this or I could have did that. And that was a regret for me. And then also, I think another regret, which a lot of athletes sometimes don't use, is really finding those people on your team that have the like-mind mindset, that are focus-driven, goal-driven, because you're going to build a relationship with them. But a lot of times, those relationships I have with my teammates stop after football. And I think if I had carried those through, post-athletics, knowing their mentality, we could have collaborated on something, or we could have just helped each other become better. I think that's one of the major regrets I have, from football, which caused me to say maybe football wasn't as good as it should have been.
Absolutely. And both those things you mentioned are definitely when I was thinking about my regrets about playing football. And I think every student athlete or any athlete in general kind of has that same mindset when their career is over. As man, I wish I could have gave a little bit more effort. I wish I could have studied a little bit harder on the game tape. I wish I could have ran them extra sprints. When I was dead tired. Just things like that. And like you said, of course, we definitely put in the work. Because we'd have never been able to maintain our scholarships or our starting positions without putting in a level of work. But you always sit there and think, as a competitor, there's always something in that, and that's kind of the mindset you have as a competitor. There's something you can always improve upon. And touching on the teammates, for example, that was one of the things I definitely regretted. As soon as after my career was over with, I kind of isolated myself from teammates. After I was finished playing, I definitely suffered with depression. With that transition phase from going from student athlete to just regular citizen and things like that. So I definitely isolated myself from teammates and things like that who, probably could have been a good support system when I was going through that tough time. We've kind of all reconnected now. We all have a group chat, about 30 of us, and we talk pretty much on the daily and things like that. So I'm glad to be a part of that, and we can connect on that level. But, just immediately after playing was definitely one of my regrets. And, of course, the injuries that I sustained, I had 5 knee surgeries my last 2 years of playing. I could have done without even all 5 of them, and I always wonder, what could have happened if I didn't injure my knees? Could I have really had a shot at maybe an NFL tryout or even, CFL for that case?
Yeah. No, I definitely agree. I think, go ahead, Dr. Pitts, let you chime in.
No, yeah, I was just going to say to both of your points, I was reading an article called "Playing Sports at the College Level is a Dream," and they talk to male and female athletes, but what resonated with me is actually one of the female basketball players. She was talking about the importance and significance of tapping into an extended network, and she said being a college athlete is incredible for your professional network because you have a second level of connection with somebody who went to your school. You also have the ability to network with other athlete alumni from your school who will take a greater interest in you and may offer more useful assistance with your career. So as you all were talking about, making the connections and stuff like that, it made me think about, it's a valid point. Like you don't have to be, or it seems to me that you don't have to be so consumed with the sport that you're playing that you still don't allow yourself to network beyond your teammates and beyond your coaches. Like still make it a point to connect with the Student Professional Development Center on campus. Make it a point to sort of develop a rapport with your professors, because there will come a point in time, even if you do go pro, where you still may have them as a frame of reference and as a support system in whatever you endeavor to do, whether you go pro or not. And I don't believe that it's a regret that any student athlete should have. When we look at it within the context of football and we watch the Football Life, they always have people on there from the professional athlete, high school, even grammar school, right? These people that are talking about how the person was and how influential they were. So for me, what Dr. Pitts always says, it's about relationships. And I think that it's really, really important to emphasize for our student athletes the importance of having cohesive and healthy relationships that can be instrumental in supporting them along their journey, whether they go pro or not. I don't think it's a regret that they should have.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely. Because, like you mentioned, the certain fields on college campuses, like a student center that is there to, help the student prepare professionally for post-college, post-athletics. And I never went, one time. It wasn't even in my mind to go. The only time I was in the office with somebody of that stature was if it was the counselor who was setting my schedule up. And that was the furthest it went. That was the furthest my mind thought. Because like you said, it was so consumed by football. So I think that goes back to using that leverage. And like the article had, mentioned, she's talking about using that leverage of the school you went to, sports you played, especially if it's with somebody else who went to the same school. And especially, which I believe is one of the greater benefits of going to a HBCU, is no matter if you went to Bowie State or you went to Morgan State and you find somebody else that is an HBCU alum, and if they play the sport, they're going to be more, likely to help you out. And I believe that's just the family culture that comes with going with the HBCU. I think that's very important. And then another thing, talking about how good has football really been, and I think Ronnie had mentioned, athletes coming from impoverished areas. Now, what would you say to that athlete who did go to a university, whether it's D1, D2, they had a full scholarship, they were a star, they come from an impoverished area, they went to school, they didn't take the academic side seriously because they didn't see as much benefit with that to get their family out of their current situation as football would give them. But they don't make it to the NFL, or they're out of the NFL within a year and they're back in that impoverished environment. And they're sitting there thinking, man, I thought football was going to do this for me. How good has football really been? What would be your advice to that person?
You want me to hit that first?
Yeah, well, if both of y'all want to take it, or, whoever, feels more up to it.
Well, my thought to that is, and I'm going to share my perspective on this as an educator and as a clinician. I really think that it's important for the person, particularly like if they're back home, I'm not even going to say it, if they're back home working a dead end job, right? I don't want to buy on blast. I don't need anybody trying to sue us. I think that it's important for that person to be aware of what their strengths are beyond the field, or beyond the court, or wherever. And so my recommendation as an educator would be for them to take a career inventory assessment. And in career inventory assessment, there are free ones out there. The more comprehensive ones are like $30. But take a career inventory assessment to find out based on what's going on in their psyche, because those assessments are created by, basically mental health professionals, right? Take a career inventory assessment that will provide for them some insight as to what their strengths are as it relates to a career trajectory that they may want to consider. In that, it may require them to perhaps take some additional classes or something like that, or it might not. But it will give them a guide. It'll give them a roadmap, if you will, that can help them to put their lives on a more positive and productive track where career endeavors are concerned. And then pursue that. You don't have to stay in a dead-end job. I think that's, part of the problem. People don't know how to get out of their situations, and there's a way out. It comes down to relationships. They have to be aligned with the appropriate people that are not going to co-sign the negative paradigm that they already have about the condition of their life.
Right. That was great. That was great advice right there.
Yeah, you kind of took the words right out of my mouth with that one. And if I can add anything to that, especially, if you've already graduated college and you find yourself back at home and your home environment is not necessarily the greatest environment, if you did get the chance to establish a support system while you were in college and networking with, your classmates and even your teammates and things like that, rely on that heavily, and reach out and make those connections. And even I know, like at Virginia State, they have, alumni associations that help students with finding job placement or, even working at the school, to get them away from that environment so they can find something and things of that nature. So definitely, having that support system and, like I said, getting out of those dead-end jobs, and we'll touch on this a little bit in one of the upcoming shows, but, getting a degree that you can actually find, good employment and not just a, basic degree just to get through the 4 years of college, because at that sense, you're kind of wasting your time if you're just going to get a degree that doesn't really equal out to, having a sustainable career for you or your family. So, I think those are definitely good resources and skills you can use. Yeah.
Hey, and
I like.
No, Jared, go ahead. I'll piggyback on what Ronnie said in a second. Go ahead.
Okay. Yes. Yeah, so another thing, those are also great, great advice. I've never heard of a career inventory until you just said it, Dr. Pitts. So that's something I'll share with people as well. But I think also when you're looking at, coming from an impoverished background, but we also have to think about there's kids that don't come from an impoverished background, but they may grow up in a home where it's abusive. And that football they may look at as a ticket out, and then they go back to that abusive environment, and that plays on them mentally. So I think, finding a career that you can go into is definitely a great start. I think getting some mental health, may be number one. Because you're in that environment. You've been away from that environment for 4 years, 5 years. Now you're right back in it. And it can really mess up a lot of guys' minds and cause them to go down, a dark path or carry on that behavior to their spouse or their children, once they do have that. But you can go ahead and say what you was going to say, Dr. Pitts.
Two things, actually, because you know how you do. Y'all stay provoking my thoughts. So the first thing real quick that I wanted to add to Ronnie's point about the Alumni Association, great point. A lot of schools, I would say, if not most of them, as an arm of the Alumni Association, they have alumni chapters all over the country that hold mixers and all types of meet and greets and things like that, where you can network and net connect with people that went to the same school you did that are in various disciplines that may be able to be instrumental in helping you to turn over a new leaf. People have always said it's not what you know, it's who you know. Well, that's because the power of a relationship goes a long, 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 long way. So if any of our listeners, if this is your situation, we would strongly encourage you, go online to your school's website, look at the Alumni Association. I guarantee you, as sure as my name is Dr. Lauren Denise Pitts, there's something. There's some sort of networking system in place that you can capitalize on, that can connect you with some people that could be instrumental in helping you to improve the quality of your life and get on a better track if you're not pleased with where you are. The other point that I wanted to add what you just said about the mental health piece is my challenge to that would be that it's systemic in that it's not just the person's mental health that's a concern here. You said something, Jared, about the player that comes from an abusive home, whether it's impoverished or not. They're out of that situation. My challenge to that would be anytime you have domestic violence or any type of clinically what we call maladaptive or dysfunctional behaviors in a family system, being away from it doesn't mean that you're away from it. It just means that you're not sitting in the middle of it with your physical person. But oh, trust and believe, those emotional effects are far reaching and they are impacting the scholar athlete on campus and the professional athlete wherever they are. Why? Because family is a system and you're connected to people that you love and care about. And if you're intuitive, you can call somebody that you love and care about and tell something's wrong on the phone. Well, you know what's wrong? They just got their head knocked in. You know what's wrong? He ran off and got high again, or she ran off and got high again. You know what's wrong? Somebody had a miscarriage, or somebody was in a car accident. The athlete that we heard about last week from the Patriots, whose father was killed in the car accident, and whose mother was, in critical condition. Whatever's going on at home is going to reach you where you are, and then to have to go back and be in the midst of it, as you said, can contribute to rapid deterioration of one's mental wellness. And it is definitely something that has to be taken into consideration. And as Jared and Ronnie both stated, we strongly encourage you to seek professional help if this is you or if this is someone that you love and care about.
Yeah, for sure.
So,
Y'all bring
Jared,
that fire. Go ahead.
I have a quick question to answer for you because me and Dr. Pitts kind of touched on this last week, and unfortunately we weren't able to get your opinion on it. But since we have you today, quick question for you. So Dr. Pitts had asked me last week about for incoming freshmen into colleges who are student athletes about having just a general psychological assessment done upon entering campus their freshman year. What are your thoughts on that? About if you're 18 again, entering college. I know you went the junior college route. Even if junior college or when you got to Bowie State, what would be your thoughts on if they had a clinician for student athletes and they said, well, let's do a general psychological assessment to see if there's any additional help or resources we can give you for the next 4 to 5 years?
Man, that's amazing. That's probably one of the key things that's missing, honestly. Like, that's probably, you got to think, I agree with it 100%, and that's a great idea that you brought up. But think about if you go into that university and they get ahead of the issue, because I know it's so many kids that's going into colleges to escape whatever the environment is, but just because they escaped, as Dr. Pitt said, it still follows you. They need that help up front because that's going to affect their on-field play. That's going to affect their academic success. That's going to affect their relationship. If they have, a significant other on campus, that's going to affect how they interact with their coaches, the professors, because they haven't dealt with what's internally bothering them. So I think that that's something that would cure a lot of issues for our student athletes that, you may see the results 10 years after they graduate and they're in, a much better place. So, yeah, I definitely agree with that. I think that should be something that is a necessity, honestly.
Yeah. Ronnie, you back? He had a technical difficulty for a second, and he's back on the switchboard. I see him. Yeah. There you are.
Okay. Did you hear what I said, Ron?
I heard the first part, and then the middle part was I lost connection, but I heard the tail end of it.
Okay, yeah. So I agree 100%. I think that it's needed. It's a necessity, and like I said, I think it will create a solution, before it becomes an issue that it's very hard to bounce back from if we get ahead of it. Like the guy, I don't know if you guys heard of the high school kid. I think it was in 2020, I believe, or late 2019. He was a top prospect about to go to Georgia Tech, and he walked in front of a train and killed himself. Did you hear about that?
Oh,
no.
Oh, no, I didn't hear about that.
So you could look him up. So he was a top recruit going to Georgia Tech receiver, like top 4 or 5 star. He had issues at home. He was 18 years old. His family was homeless, living out of a hotel. And it was just him, his mother, and his brothers. They would sleep in cars and things like that. But he was, I think, a week away from going on campus. And he was saying, and they were seeing signs that he was just very depressed. And he wanted to hurry up and help his family, which was going to be going to college, getting into going to the NFL. But point where he just couldn't take it. And he killed and walked in front of a train and killed himself. Now imagine if there was, as soon as they sign that paper to commit, there's, somebody that can help them, like you just mentioned. I think that would have saved his life.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It would definitely would have gave him, the resources in that moment. That's just sad. And I didn't hear about that. That's just, that's
and you think, it goes back to how good has football really been. Yes, football is good for him. It's that release on the field when he, doesn't have to deal with that stuff that his family's going through. But maybe sometimes football has to be taken away. And maybe that season you need to spend it really finding yourself and working out those issues. Your talent is not going to go down in a year if you're a talented player. But it'll do much better for you, mentally and things like that. And then another aspect of this conversation is the benefits of football. You play the game, you have your individual accomplishments, the team accomplishments, the life lessons that are great and can carry you on. You can pass on to your children and things like that. And then when I think about it, the benefits, and one of the issues with me where maybe I didn't see the benefit was I think sometimes we look at it from a selfish perspective as far as, I didn't do this, I didn't achieve this. But with me playing football, I hit on, I think, the first episode we did, it was able to create a foundation for the relationship with my father and I. I didn't think of that up front. I thought of that probably 3 years after I finished playing. Now, if I wasn't looking at it from a selfish perspective, I would have seen that up front, and that would have helped me transition smoother. So with some, benefits, maybe if it's for you, Ronnie, maybe when you got out of that regretful state and you started to look back and say, hey, well, I did do this, I was able to do this. Like, what was that like for you?
Absolutely. I jotted down some of the things that the benefits of football for me. And the first one, and Jared, this is no knock against Bowie State, but our coach definitely used this term every time we played Bowie State. But he used to always say, you'll never make it down the street if you throw a rock at every dog that barks at you.
That's funny.
And when he said that, when he said it, we said, oh, he's just got an old saying. But now that I'm more of an adult and things like that, if you sit there and react or entertain every little criticism or negative thing somebody says about you, you lose focus of what you're trying to do and lose focus of where you're trying to get to. So that was one of the things I definitely learned. And I was never really a trash talker in football anyways. I might have talk trash off the field and things like that. But during the game, I try to stay as focused as possible. So I really used that life lesson. And then, a couple other things that, time management. And I know my wife is listening right now, so she might chuckle at that. But, playing football definitely helped me with time management. Especially nowadays, I'm, currently getting my master's. I work a full-time job. I have a part-time job. I'm doing this podcast. So, I have to have some type of balance in my life. And football definitely taught me that, juggling school and football at the same time. Adversity. My college career was filled with nothing but adversity due to injuries. And also, in 2013, when, the championship game was canceled due to an unfortunate incident that happened at the CIAA banquet, I had to learn how to get through adversity. That was kind of the first time in my life I had faced constant, consistent adversity. And I never wavered. I never gave up. I never threw in the towel. I never quit. And then the last thing I learned was, having trust in somebody outside of myself. And, that, and even though that's something I kind of work on to this day, but, in football, you have to be able to trust somebody else outside of you. And, for me playing on the offensive line, that's why I really learned to hone in on that trust, because you have 5 guys who have specific assignments. In order for the quarterback and everybody else to do their job, they have to trust us and we have to trust each other. So those were some of the big things I definitely learned, during football and after my playing career.
Yeah, no, that's definitely like spot on. Though you don't got to bring up the championship thing, though. If we had beat on overtime, we would have been, in that position. So don't bring my best friend. He always talking about it. Yeah, my best friend. He played with me at Bowie. He played safety, and he always he'll send a picture, he'll be watching the game, be like, man, we should have won, da da da. So I ain't thought about it.
We gave y'all 3 overtimes, man.
Y'all gave us three chances to win. Nah, thanks for bringing that up again. I appreciate it. But that was definitely spot on. What do you think, Dr. Pitt, about from your perspective, seeing the benefits?
Well, before I chime in, I do want to say this, folks. We're going to continue to reiterate how important these conversations are. We want to put emphasis on how much we would appreciate you joining the conversation, whether it's calling us live during the show at 515-605-9744 or giving us your feedback, comments, questions, what have you, at htpregame@gmail.com. If you're interested in sponsorship, certainly you can email us or just go on to the website at drlaurendpitts.com and hit the donate button. You can get a sponsorship packet by emailing htpregame@gmail.com and just, sending your request that way. But my contribution to this is going to be from an educational piece. I'm the oldest one on the team. But education, blood, sweat, and tears and loss of life was sacrificed for us to be able to have a formal education. You all know I'm also an adjunct professor, and I will tell you that one of the things that is even more obvious to me now than it was before, even though I thought it, is that there's an arrogance. There's an arrogance in this nation that sort of takes education for granted that is very different from what I see in my students from around the world, because I literally am teaching students from all over the globe. And the attitude regarding education is my foreign students view it as so much more important. They view it as a privilege. They view it as an honor. And what I want to say to the listeners is this: when you have the opportunity, particularly those athletes that I'm going to speak to, the athletes that go on a full ride first, you need to be humble and grateful and thankful for the opportunity. It's not just about you going pro. One of the things that I admired about both of these gentlemen is that they recognize receiving a scholarship for their athletic ability was going to relieve financial burden from their parents and having to pay for their education. So to not have that burden can actually, over time, contribute to that generational wealth that we were talking about. Because I will tell you, as someone who has $382,000 worth of student loan debt, it's no joke. It is absolutely, positively no joke. Somebody could buy a nice home for the amount of student loan debt that I have. But my point is this, where education is concerned, you being able to get this free education, or at least this partially paid for education, whether you go pro or not, you need the education. This is a golden opportunity for you to better your resume. It is an opportunity that positions you to be able to stay disciplined in school, stay on top of your work, because you are going to want to not only perform to your absolute best on the field or the court or whatever your athletic endeavors are, but you're going to need to be able to perform in the world beyond the sport. You're not going to play the sport forever. You need the education. You need to know whether or not your daggone manager's cheating you out your money. You need to know whether or not you're getting in over your head financially. You need to know whether or not the contract that you got on that multi-million-dollar house is a good one or not. But folk are so focused on the money and so focused on going pro that they're missing the very significant importance of the educational piece. So my encouragement to you is understanding how really being serious about the educational part of your journey can add value to your life far beyond your athletic career.
Yeah, no, that was definitely some good insight right there. I definitely like the point that you hit on as you tied it back into the earlier conversation about generational wealth and how just having that scholarship, which, you know, some people don't even look at it only because we're not, a lot of times some people aren't forward thinkers and you sometimes can't see 10 years down the line.
Right.
But that is probably, you know, something that, I mean, 99% will give you a head start towards whatever generational wealth looks like you. I mean, it could be $1 million, it can be 10,000, whatever it is, propels you to get there faster instead of slowing you down if you do have a large amount of student debt. And I think, so when you look at it from that perspective, and then you ask yourself at the end of your playing days, how good has football really been? It's been very good. You know, it's been very good because, you know, that can also affect your relationships. You know, if you have a huge amount of debt, it can affect your relationships. And not having that can improve your relationships. It can make life a little better. I'm not saying if somebody is in that amount of debt that life is terrible, because it's not. But it all depends how you, it all depends on how you know, you take it mentally. And you, like you said, you still educate yourself on how to handle your finances and make sure you are paying that down, but you're still not in a position where it's just paycheck to paycheck. You know, you're at a dead-end situation in your life. Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I think a lot of kids should be told that going into college. Like, yes, you know, whether you make it or not, you have put yourself ahead of the 8 ball by getting this scholarship and you're getting your degree. And for a lot of kids, that may be the first one in their family to do so. So I think that's very underestimated right there.
I wanted to add more to that. That's all right. Because, again, as you were thinking, you provoked my thoughts. You know, I'm a little radical in my approach sometimes. But what do you guys think about, and I want to look at this within the context of us as a people, black and brown people all over the country. Don't you think it's interesting that we have to have English, we have to have 4 years of English, 2 years of history, 4 years of math, whatever the breakdown is for Common Core. How come financial management is not a mandated course? And particularly for all of our HBCUs, for all 107 HBCUs that are listening all over the nation, scholar athletes or not, financial management should be a mandated course regardless of what the student's major is. It will speak to breaking the systemic poverty and lack that we see as a people in this nation. All my HBCU presidents, I'm calling you out to add to your curriculum mandated financial management for undergraduate study, regardless of what the student's major is. I'm calling you out.
I'm behind you on that. I second that. Yeah, like I definitely agree with that. I talked about that briefly and from cleats to loafers, but it only makes sense because, and I think it's good for athletes or the general student body. But especially as athletes, if you know that person is going to walk into money in a couple months once they leave your school, I think you're doing a huge disservice by not giving them financial curriculum so they can be better. And I think the reason it's not is just, in my opinion, you know, this is just years in the past. African Americans have always been on the side of the fence where people are trying to keep you down. They don't want to. They give you a little bit just to survive, but they don't want to educate you to the point where you can thrive beyond our white counterparts.
That's why
aspects.
HBCUs have to do it.
Yeah, and you would think with so much prestige at these HBCUs, the presidents, like the alumni that we read off every week, it's so many powerful African American men and women doing great things. So we know the knowledge is there. We know the skill and the intelligence is there. It should be a no-brainer to pass that down to other African American men and women, to start their careers off.
Yep.
Absolutely. And if I could just give my opinion on that real quick, I don't know if y'all, Jared, I'm pretty sure you might have read this book before, but a book that I like to read from time to time is Rich Dad Poor Dad. And one of the things that he touches on, it's a great book. So if you haven't read it, definitely, if you want to start your path to financial freedom, definitely read that book and add it to your arsenal of books. And one of the things he touches on is, most public schools only teach kids how to be good employees and not how to be employers. And when I was listening to you talk, Jared and Dr. Pitts, one of the things I was thinking about, especially for especially me and Jared's generation of African American and other colored communities out there, when you see the old TV, like Netflix is adding the old TV shows like Moesha, Parker's, all those old black television shows that we used to watch growing up. And one of the things you always saw on there was, even from Fresh Prince and things like that, everybody owned something. In Moesha, her dad owned the car dealership. In the other show, they either owned, their houses or had businesses on the side. And we don't see that in our programming no more. And I think a lot of that is systemic. I don't want to go on no large rant about that, but I do think that's systemic. And I even used to hear my dad talk about when he was in high school in the 70s, how they used to teach him how to budget checkbooks, how to write a check, basic skills like that. They don't do that anymore.
Right.
I think
on purpose.
Think public school education. Say that again, Dr. Pitt?
I think it's on purpose.
Absolutely. I think it is systemic. I think it is, programmed for this generation to just be, like I said, really good employees. And, even when you were in school and you used to hear people say, well, they want to have their own business or things like that, even those teachers would kind of, shun them away from that because, even that teacher's own insecurities about her job. Well, I'm this teacher. I make this certain amount of salary. Why would I encourage you to go out here and do something on your own and then you're making more money than me? And, so I think, a lot of those things factor into it. But, those courses should definitely be mandated. In this area in Central Virginia, a lot of the high schools are starting to mandate some form of money management courses for the high school students. But HBCUs definitely need to take heed to that and add it, for the entire college body.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I took an economics course at Bowie. I didn't learn anything about money at all. And I went into it thinking I would, but it wasn't. So I think that's definitely something that should be implemented. I know a lot of people now in the state of the world that we're in, with HBCUs being at the top of conversations, I know a lot of people are donating money. I think Netflix, CEO donated some money. So hopefully they can put some of that money towards building that curriculum and things like that. I think that'll be a win-win situation overall.
Right. Yeah, there's so much that needs to be done as a people, and as we're winding down with these last 6 minutes that we have left, I want us to put the emphasis, and each of us can chime in very, very quickly. There's a ton of craziness going on in the world today. I'm just going to go ahead and put it out there. I actually I sent 2 very lengthy emails to CNN yesterday. I'm not convinced. I'm not convinced that all of these breaking news reports that are coming out I'm just not convinced. But what I would say is, regardless of what I believe, what we know to be true on this show, it is imperative. We have 31 days before this election. It doesn't make a difference to me whether you're registered Democrat or Republican, but you need to vote. I almost pass out every time I hear somebody say that they're so displeased with both of the candidates that they're thinking about not voting. Not voting is voting. It's voting. It's voting. We need you to vote. We are encouraging you to vote. If you are not registered, there is still time. You have to vote. To think for a moment that your vote doesn't matter is craziness. It is absolute craziness. The one thing that comes to mind is being taught as a little girl that the greatest trick that the enemy ever played on mankind, and by the enemy I mean those who believe that there is a devil and a God. The greatest trick that the enemy ever played on mankind was convincing mankind that he did not exist. You have to vote. You need to cast your ballot. If you need to do it and you don't feel comfortable going to your polling station, then cast it by putting it in one of the, but you got to vote, folks. You have to vote. You have to vote. You have to vote. This election is by far, in my lifetime, the most important election that this country has ever seen. You have to vote. We are in a very, very, very precarious situation as a nation. You got to vote. I cannot stress it enough. You have to go out and vote. I wish that conversation with the NFL owners had gone a little further, in that they would have opened the enclosed stadium, that they would, for those teams that have enclosed stadiums, that they would have opened those as polling stations so that more people could have gotten in safely, because what a way to effectively social distance and be able to get massive, massive, massive numbers of people to cast their ballot quickly without chaos and confusion, to use the enclosed football stadiums as polling stations. It's paramount. You have to vote. You have to.
Yeah, I agree.
And local elections as well. We all know voting for the president is important, but the local elections in your localities are as equally, if not more important, because at least those elected officials you can actually get in contact with a lot better than you can the president. So, it is very important to vote in the presidential election, but make sure you're voting every year when local offices open up, because those are the people who directly affect you. They directly affect your policies. Those are the police chiefs, the sheriffs, the Commonwealth attorneys. Those are the people who directly affect you first.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I agree. I couldn't, say it better. Definitely have to vote. I know I will. And I think it is definitely, of course, in Ronnie in our lifetime, one of the most important. I thought it meant Obama, that was the most important, but this, of course, that had its own reasons for African American, but this one right here is like,
it's crucial.
I mean,
it's democracy.
Ridiculous.
Crucial.
It's
This will affect our children, grandchildren, all of that.
Yeah. This is not about. This is far greater than there's the first black president. This is about protecting. This is about protecting our democracy. So, folks, we want you to get out and vote. We love you here at House Talk Pregame. We are so glad that you are with us every Saturday morning at 11 a.m. We want you to make sure that you tune in next Saturday. We have another powerful show lined up for you. Email us. Call us live during the show. We want to hear from you. Until next Saturday at 11 a.m., I am your host, empowerment coach, inspirational speaker, couple marriage and family therapist, Dr. Lauren D. Pitts, with my amazing co-hosts, Jared Johnston and Ronnie Ransom. Until next Saturday at 11 o'clock, we're out.
Peace.